Hello, everyone, and welcome to our monthly webinar series, How to Do Research and Get Published. Thanks for joining us today. Today, we're focusing on what it takes to get published in an academic journal, specifically how to write and structure your manuscript. We'll guide you through the publishing process, including what you can do to increase your chances of getting published, the timeline, how to disseminate your research upon acceptance, and much more. But first, I'd like to introduce you to the team you'll be speaking with today. We're joined by Jessica Offenberger, a publishing editor on the STM Journal's editorial team. She manages a range of science and medicine journals, working with editors and societies to develop new strategies and problem solve. Next, Hannah Pearson is an assistant editor at Sage. She holds an MFA in creative writing from the University of South Carolina and studied English and American Sign Language at Clemson University. Next, Marty Lewis Hunsticker is a retired pediatric nurse and preceptor, editor of Creative Nursing, developmental and copy editor of the Interdisciplinary Journal of Partnership Studies, and and an affiliate faculty member of the School of Nursing at the University of Minnesota. Next, Dr. Tiffany A. Flowers is a multidisciplinary researcher with a background in early childhood education, curriculum and instruction, psychology, social, philosophical and historical foundations of education, teaching and learning, and language literacy and culture. She investigates educational policy, contemporary and historical curriculum issues, and equity within literacy and research focused on cultural contexts, community engagement, and issues related to families. And last, my name is Sean Scarsbrick, a senior marketing manager on the author marketing team at Sage, primarily focused on supporting authors and reviewers as they move through the publishing process. Here is some of the upcoming work from our panelists. Please join Marty for a virtual launch of Creative Nursing's new issue, featuring discussions on case study methodology, analytical approaches in research, and more. And in addition, Tiffany is currently working on Sage Campus courses on choosing a journal, navigating peer review, and article promotion. In the meantime, you can sign up for a trial of Sage Campus or check with your institution or library to see if you may already have access. As we go through the webinar today, please do submit your questions to our panelists. At the end of the call, we'll go through our Q&A, starting with those that have the most upvotes, so please do submit anything you can there. And with that, I'm happy to start off, and we're going to pass it off to my colleague, Hannah.
Thank you, Sean. We're going to start by talking about some questions to ask yourself. So millions of journal articles are published each year, and we suggest that you ask yourself a few questions before you even start your research. This will help you determine where you ultimately submit your manuscript. These questions include, who's going to be interested? How does your research build on what we already know? How significant is your message? How sure are you of your findings? Is your work novel and innovative? Does it fill a gap or provide an extension of a theory? Perhaps it shows conventional wisdom was mistaken. Why are you wanting or needing to publish your work? And what will it contribute to the field? Now I'll pass it to Marty real quick to get us started with some tips.
Thank you, Hannah. So for all of me, this slide should say tips for getting started writing. And the first step, which hopefully came before any of these other slides we're talking about, is decide what you care about. That should have informed what topic you chose. If you chose a topic because you have expertise in it, but it doesn't bring you any joy to tell the world about it, good luck with that, because you've got the wrong topic. Expertise is fine, and that'll help you work, but you have to at least like the subject that you're writing about. It's better to have a topic that you feel passionate about and that'll take a lot of work to get out into the world than to have a topic that you know very well, but it doesn't get you up in the morning. So please think about that. If you have a topic you love, writing the actual paper can still be the most daunting step when you're looking at an empty page or a blank screen is kind of the new way. If you feel blocked or paralyzed, how do I even start? My first piece of advice is fake it till you make it. Pretend that you're writing a scholarly manuscript and the rest will flow. There's kind of a mantra among writers which says, how do I know what I think till I read what I've written? So think about that. Plan time to brainstorm, but also time to just sit and stare at the wall. If you think you can multitask and write a scholarly article in little bits and pieces of time, that does not work. You need blocks of time. Read articles in your field. If you see one that is wonderful and you look at your article and say, oh, I need to start over, that's a learning process. If you see an article that's been well received and you look at yours and you think, dang, mine is pretty good, then you're one step ahead. Find an experienced writer, not necessarily to be a co-author. Having co-authors has joys and concerns, but find someone who will give you a critical eye. If they can't understand something you're saying, your readers won't either. I can't overemphasize the importance of an outline in structuring your manuscript. We'll be talking about the parts of a manuscript in a moment, but those are generic headings, introduction, methods, results. Those are generic headings. The subheadings are your unique contribution to the world. That's the vein of precious metal. That's the knowledge that you have gathered to get out into the world. When you've got something ready for prime time, resist the temptation to submit it right away. Let it breathe for at least 5 days. Then read it out loud, not just under your breath. Read it out loud, and you will find things that you need to fix. Don't submit this and expect the editors or the peer reviewers of the journal to fix things for you that you should have fixed yourself. Sage has just a wealth of resources for you, and you'll be getting a list of those things. Including, they have a webinar library like that this will be included in on topics, including how to convert your dissertation into a thesis. I'm sorry, dissertation or thesis into a manuscript. Webinars about authorship and collaboration. Links to English language editing services and so forth. So that's things to think about for getting started. Read these other bullet points as well.
So it is now time to consider which journal you would like to submit to. It is crucial for you to do your homework with this step. While you may want to publish in a journal like Nature or Science, you first need to think about the best home for your paper. You want to focus on many factors and not just one metric. As you are exploring journals, think about the journal's reputation. What do your peers say about this journal? What types of papers does the journal publish? What type of paper are you wanting to publish? Is it empirical research, a review paper, brief report, or book review? Does the journal publish these kinds of papers? Look at your reference list and see if those publications might be a good home for your paper. Does your paper fit within the aims and scopes of that journal? Who's the editor? Who sits on the editorial board? Are they highly cited in your field? How diverse is the editorial board? Do you know someone who has published in the journal? Does the journal state the current rejection rate or the turnaround time if that's important to you? What is the peer review policy? Is it anonymous? Are peer review comments published openly? What is the readership of the journal? Is it a subscription-based or open access journal? Do you have funder requirements you need to meet, where you are required to publish under a CC BY license or similar? Is the journal indexed? Where? What's the impact factor? What do the journal's key metrics tell you? Could publishing in this journal have an impact on your research? Does your institution have any restrictions on where you can submit articles? For example, does your institution require that the journal have a certain impact factor or a certain license? Does the journal you are looking at provide an open access option if needed? Be on the lookout for predatory publishers as well, journals who don't do proper peer review. Transparency in the author guidelines is key to this. Predatory journals are on the rise. Look for inclusion in indexes such as Scopus or PubMed and through publication policies. Here at Sage, we offer 2 different services for authors, Sage Path and our Journal Recommender. This will help you identify good journals to submit to, plus other publishers have similar tools. Speaking of authorship, authorship confers credit and has important academic, social, and financial implications. Authorship also implies responsibility and accountability for published work. It's important to understand who counts as an author. Anyone has a legitimate claim to authorship if they have done all of the following. made a substantial contribution to the concept or design of the work or the acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of the data, drafted the article or revised it critically to include important intellectual content, agreed with and approved the version to be published, agreed to be accountable for all aspects of the work by ensuring that questions related to the accuracy or integrity of any part of the work are appropriately investigated and resolved. These criteria apply to all article types when there is no acquisition, analysis, or interpretation of data for the work, such as an editorial. The first criterion might be met by conception or design of the work. Co-authorship is wonderful in that it allows you to tap into diverse thoughts and ideas, share the workload, and garner more recognition. Although it is good to remember that all authors have to sign off on major revisions and on the final product. If a large multi-center group has conducted the work, the group should identify the individuals willing to accept direct responsibility for the manuscript. These individuals should fully meet the criteria for authorship. When submitting a manuscript authored by a group, the corresponding author should specify the group name, if one exists, and clearly identify the group members who can take credit and responsibility for the work as authors. The byline of the article identifies who is directly responsible for the manuscript, and Medline lists authors whichever names appear on the byline. If the byline includes a group name, Medline will list the names of individual group members who are authors or who are collaborators, sometimes called non-author contributors. If there is a note associated with the byline clearly stating that the individual names are elsewhere in the paper, and whether those names are authors and collaborators. For authors submitting to social science or humanities journals, all parties who have made a substantive contribution to the article should be listed as authors. Principal authorship, authorship order, and other publication credits should be based on the relative scientific or professional contributions of the individuals involved, regardless of their status. A student is usually listed as principal author on any multiple authored publication that substantially derives from the student's dissertation or thesis. Anyone who has not done all of these things cannot be listed as an author. AI cannot be listed as an author. If someone does not meet these authorship criteria, but you still want to acknowledge them, be sure to list them in the acknowledgements section. An example of this could be librarians and media specialists who help identify and access literature, and developers of tools who gave permission for their use. As you start writing, you'll want to think about the basics like the document type and file format. There's a couple different options. Usually people use Microsoft Word and or LaTeX. When submitting your manuscript in Microsoft Word, ensure your heading levels are clear and your sections are clearly defined. Remove all tracking, author comments, and content control settings. Do not assume that links will be live when published. Include full wording of DOIs, URLs, and other links. Make sure all tables and figures conform to the journal's author guidelines and typical articles. Be sure to locate your journal's specific Microsoft Word guidelines to check you are ticking all of the right boxes. LaTeX is a document preparation system, and these files are most often used to produce technical and scientific documents. This is because it can be easier to format things like equations, which are often difficult to format in a standard word processor. Among other things, LaTeX can handle non-Roman alphabets, bibliographies, and formulaic drawing. The learning curve is steeper than Microsoft Word, but once you learn the basics, LaTeX can save a lot of time. Many publishers welcome LaTeX files, but you should always check if there is a specific LaTeX template available to download, which will contain comprehensive guidelines. The Sage LaTeX template zip file is available on the Sage Author Gateway. This template includes BibTeX files for Sage Harvard, Vancouver, and APA styles. So you may prefer to use this template if it matches your journal's copy editing style. Note that these are not actual templates used in any part of the production process, but are only used to generate a proof for review purposes. Most journals will not have their own LaTeX template unless the journal or society identifies a strong need for one. Bib files contain bibliographic references and are usually used together with LaTeX files. BST file specifies the formatting of the bib document, which generating items for the bibliography, when generating items for the bibliography, and can also be used to create HTML output from the bib file. If you have used bib or BST files when creating your article, you should include these with your submission so the editors can generate the reference list and citations in the journal-specific style. There are a few video journals that also exist. So if video is the best format, you may consider submitting to a video journal or using video audio files or other multimedia types as one of your supplemental files. Follow the author guidelines for all file formats allowed and what the journal will consider. You may need to consider converting any current files into ones for submission. Now let's talk a bit about article structure. Title usually gives the first impression of the whole story. It can enhance searchability and engage your readers from the start. So much that it can impact the everlasting success of your article. It may even impact whether or not peer reviewers agree to review it in the first place. Some journals also ask for a short title, which usually appears as a header on the published article. With the title, it is important to speak to your target audience and abide by conventions of discipline. Read multiple titles in journals you want to submit to for a sense of what's conventional. And also be direct. Make sure it is clear what the article will cover, but don't be so creative or enthusiastic that you overpromise article content. Consider avoiding geographic identifiers and references to time-limited topics, COVID or AI, for example. Be concise. 15 words is not a hard rule, but a good approximation, especially if there are fillers like the, and of, etc. And those are typically not included in the word count. Avoid abbreviations. An abbreviation might signal more than one thing, so you don't want to confuse or mislead readers or search engines. Spell things out in full in the title, then again on first use in the abstract or the article and put the abbreviation in parentheses. Avoid jargon, but emphasize keywords. Do use terms that are critical to or well known within the discipline, but limit the highly niche jargon and official phrasing or overwrought grammar. The authorship is an honor, especially for the young investigators, graduate students, and postdocs. Always make sure that the name is spelled correctly, and the presentation of your full name should be the way that you want it, um, as if you continue to change your full name, databases like PubMed may not recognize it as the same author. It's worth noting if an author has a first name and then two other names without a hyphen, make clear which of those two names is the beginning of the last name. Um, for example, if Marty's last name were not hyphenated, editors and publishers wouldn't know whether the citation is Hunstinger ML or Lewis Hunstinger M, etc. Don't make them have to ask you about it. You'll want to make sure everyone meets the authorship for criteria and everyone is listed. Sage and many other publishers do not allow changes for the authorship once your article is accepted. When submitting to a journal, you will need to enter the author name into the submission portal, but you'll also most likely need to add their names to a separate page to facilitate anonymous peer review, depending on the peer review policy of the journal. We encourage you to link your account to ORCID. Be sure to check the submission guidelines for specifics. The abstract is a brief summary of your article, and after the title is the first part of the article that people read. It is the first elaboration of an argument your reader will see. Oftentimes, the abstract is easier to write after the article itself is written. The abstract should be short, usually no more than 250 words. The title and abstract are what is shared with potential reviewers. If the title and abstract are easy to read and clearly outline what the manuscript is about, reviewers will be more likely to agree to review your manuscript and reduce the time your manuscript is in peer review. Also, as the abstract is the first introduction to your article once it's published, a well-written abstract may increase the likelihood of someone reading it. Concision, clarity, and strategic use of keywords are as important in abstracts as they are in titles. Unlike titles, though, abstracts can make use of signaling language. Abstracts present an argument in miniature that follows the basic formula, problem, methods, takeaways. Read the abstracts of several articles in the journal in which you're submitting for a sense of how they're structured. Do make sure all the major points of the article need to be included in the abstract, and everything that is in the abstract needs to be included somewhere in the article. It is imperative that the wording matches in both places. You can also use keywords to help focus your abstract. Speaking of keywords, keywords are vital. Use 1 to 2 keywords in your title and 3 to 4 in your abstract and 3 to 7 in your keywords field if applicable. Note that a keyword can be a single word, like spending, or a short phrase, like occupational therapy. Always opt for specificity. Think about what key phrases you would give a search engine if you were searching for your own article. Write for your audience, but bear in mind how search engines work too. Title is the most important location for keywords. Reuse keywords several times in the abstract, use strong descriptive keywords in your section headings, and utilize variants and abbreviations wherever possible. Keywords also help editors find reviewers for manuscript submissions. And now I'll pass it to Marty to talk a bit more about article structure. And I do believe you're still muted, so I'm going to unmute. I'm going to mute.
I believe that the structure is maybe one of the reasons that all of our attendees are here today. As an editor, I can tell you that's one of the most important things. These others are important too, but I'm going to be talking really fast to give you this information about article structure. So after those initial parts that Hannah talked about, manuscripts typically follow a certain structure. The outline that we are highlighting is one of the most common, but your journal's submission guidelines will tell you what structure they want. The introduction identifies a clear, compelling opening statement of purpose. Why did I write this article, and why should you read it? You detail the subject and the aim of the article, the research questions, hypotheses, and conceptual framework. Literature review is sometimes part of the introduction and sometimes has its own section, which is sometimes called current knowledge. This information might be spread over several places. There might be some in your framework, some in your methodology, rather than all in one place. But you need to have a solid review of the current literature on your topic, summarizes the theories you're applying to research, and connects them to your study. Materials and methods. How did I get done? How did I gather this data? What did I do? You need to explain why you chose the methodology you did to get the results that answers the question you asked. Specify upfront the reason why you chose this specific method and include references. That'll reduce the likelihood of reviewers asking for it, which slows down the process if you have to have another back and forth. There should be enough introduction about your procedure and methods for the readers to be able to trust the data you're giving them and to reproduce it if they wanted to. It's important to include any relevant materials or methodology used, including ethical approval. I'll mention that more in a moment. Some common subsections in this include, in the methods section, include participants, sampling technique, instruments used, including whether you had permission to use or else if it's in public domain, procedures, data analysis, and ethical considerations. Any tool that uses self-report, you always have to say, anytime you refer to what you learned from this tool, that it was self-report. Remember that, because a self-report tool is, depending on how you've asked the questions, can be very, very valuable or not as valuable. The ethical consideration section, I'm going to take a moment to talk more about this. It's close to my heart. My journal requires a section on ethical considerations, even if the study was determined to be exempt from IRB requirements. even reports of quality improvement and other projects, if there are any procedures or tools that involved, that could have an impact on human beings. And I'm going to give you an example. We had an article that was a report of a project involving educating managers of environmental services, housekeeping in a hospital. And one of the tools surveyed their employees. Well, we said, you have to tell readers that you made sure the employees knew that participation was voluntary. There might have been some unspoken pressure for these people to participate in this. And you have to tell readers, no, we made sure they knew that they could choose to not participate and it wouldn't have anything to do with their jobs. Then there's the human aspect. If you think that environmental services, housekeeping people in hospitals don't get involved in discussions with patients and families as they're going about doing their work, if you think they don't get involved in discussions about death and dying, what it's going to be like, you better think again, because they are. And one of the things these people reported was that those conversations with patients as they did their cleaning were stressful for them. And if it was stressful for them to talk about it with patients, don't you think it might have been stressful for them to talk about it with a reviewer as well? So I'm not saying that this tool should not have been used, that this data should not have been gathered, but the readers have to indicate that they're aware of the human consequences of what they're doing. In the results section, that's where you share your data. Those are the characters around which you develop the story, and the text is the story. Data are facts, numbers, and observations, usually presented in tables and figures. We'll talk more about how to present narrative data, which is mostly words. Follow your author's guidelines and format for typical published articles. Also pay attention to parameters of significance. In other words, is my data suggestive? Does it actually statistically significant? The discussion section, so results, you presented your findings, then the discussion covers what the results mean and connect them back to the literature. This is where authors can speculate about relationships among variables. I personally give a lot more latitude in the discussion section if authors want to speculate about causation. You cannot impute causation. You cannot say A caused B. You can say there was A, there was B, and there are very strong relationships, correlations between these two, and let the readers decide for themselves about causation. You cannot impute causation. This section is the last opportunity for you to convince the readers about your case. It's kind of like a closing argument. Summarize your results, especially unexpected ones, and other interpretations of your data. Now then, at the end of the discussion section is a limitation section where you state, these are the things about my study that were limits, that we can't just say A caused B. And things would be characteristics of the setting or the sample. And you need to include any sources of potential bias. Potential for bias in a study's tools or procedures is not a deal breaker. It's a rare study that doesn't have some potential bias. Any non-random sampling, and especially purposive sampling, is the setup for selection bias. But the more thoroughly you show your awareness of the presence of potential bias in your study, the stronger and more credible your paper will be. The conclusion brings awareness to the limitations and doesn't go beyond the evidence. Any recommendations for future directions are here. It sums up the whole article, leaving readers with a sense of what you have learned and what more there is to be learned. The sequence of how to put this stuff together, the easiest place to start after you finish your outline, which is crucial, is to start with the method section. Tell the readers what you did and why you did it. The results section usually follows next in your sequence of putting this together as a presentation of what you actually found. But you don't have deep analysis there. Start by organizing your data to create the research story that you want to tell. Then build the manuscript by then diving into the discussion, lit review, and introduction sections to frame the research findings. A poorly written story can hide even the best science. I'm going to say that again. A poorly written story can hide even the best science. So make sure to connect the components of the story together from introduction to discussion to conclusion with methods and results in the middle.
Thank you, Marty. So let's dive a bit deeper into methods and analysis. When it comes to looking at the methods and data analysis, there will be a number of key items to focus on. The first is the study design. Make sure there are no concerns with the way in which the study was conducted. Is the study design common for the type of study conducted? Are the experiments and methodology used common for the field or novel? If they are novel to the field, there may need to be additional explanation as to why the methods chosen were used. Is the material and method section descriptive enough so that the study could be reproduced? This includes items like the procedure followed or the literature reference to the procedure, including critical steps that are unique to the study, such as dilutions of antibodies used, as well as catalog numbers and company names, etc., etc. Are these statistical techniques relevant to the study? Are they the standard for that kind of study? And are the materials and methods used for the study appropriate for the research question being addressed? A lot of the questions raised in analyzing the materials and methods section flow over into this results discussion and conclusion section. Common questions to think about include, are the results presented in a way that best emphasize the findings? Are these sections free of unsupported generalizations or assumptions? Are the conclusions appropriate for the study? And are there appropriate limitations and directions for future research?
Um, I'm going to quickly go through this because some of it is just very, very straightforward. The author info, we already talked about that. Who is an author and who is not? Please remember to use the acknowledgement section for people who have helped you with your article but don't qualify for authorship. The statements and declaration section can be quite specific to your particular journal. And providing all this correct information at the get-go reduces the likelihood that your manuscript will be sent back, and it'll save you time. References, all sources cited in the article must be in the reference list, and all sources in the reference list must be cited in the article, regardless of what format you're using. Be sure to check the reference style in your journal, and Sage has a great webinar about that. We often hear people ask if their papers are more likely to be accepted if they cite the articles from this journal. And the answer is no, not for ethical, not for reputable journals. No, it just, you aren't going to increase your chances of getting published. That's not how it works. If you do cite them, it's probably because the articles very specific to your field, and that's great. But having to be from that particular journal, no, that doesn't make a difference. You should be recent. Most of your references should be within the last 5 years, last 10 years at most. There are some legacy sources that can be 40, 50 years old that are fine to include, but that's the basis on which they're included. They should not be the bulk of your reference list. Supporting materials. Most journals have space limits, so consider supplemental materials. And we're going to be giving some examples about these shortly. This can be a great way to illustrate your research. Video and audio files are interactive. So that's all I'm going to say about article structure.
Okay, let's talk about reporting guidelines. Review the reporting guidelines by study type on the Equator Network website and make sure that your article follows the items listed in the reporting guidelines. Follow ethical reporting guidelines and be sure that is clear throughout your paper and declarations. Many people ask if the research needs to be new or novel. Depending on the journal, it might not be a requirement that all articles make significant or especially novel contributions. However, at minimum, the journal does expect it to be clear what the contribution of the research is, because it is difficult for future research to build on a study that lacks clear findings or limitations. Next, we expect research to have appropriate ties to the literature. The literature review is what builds out the theoretical framework. Summarize the theories you are applying to your research and connect the theories to lay the groundwork for your study. Typically, in the literature review, you are not introducing any new information about your own study, but are weaving together information from prior research and studies that inherently shows that your research, studies design, and methodology is grounded in theory. The most important thing is that you show how your investigation builds upon and contributes to existing scholarly work and theoretical development. Most editors and reviewers expect to see both a concise, targeted literature review as well as an explanation of the most relevant theories that uphold your research question or intervention approach. Neglecting to include a theory could be taken as an indication that the research question is relatively ungrounded or perhaps speculative. The most important thing is that you show how your investigation builds upon and contributes to existing scholarly work and theoretical development. Editors and reviewers expect to see a theory or theories presented in the literature review to support the rationale for the investigation. They then expect you to return to the theory or theories in the discussion conclusion and next steps section. Lastly, a common critique that a journal appreciates are issues with figure legends. Make sure your figures are easy to read and clearly labeled. A figure legend should be detailed enough to explain the figure so that a reader does not need to immediately refer to the results section for additional information. Now let's talk a bit about writing style. Authors should use an academic writing style. It should have a consistent person and tense that's appropriate for the field. They should try to avoid regional or discipline-specific jargon. General improvements on language quality are appreciated. Choosing your terminology carefully is important. Some aspects to consider are active voice over passive voice, concise language, simpler sentence construction, correct article use, and single plural agreement of verbs and nouns. The article should also be cohesive and consistent in its overall organization and flow of the manuscript. And journals expect a bias-free, inclusive language to be used. It needs to be appropriate for a global audience. And authors should also take care when writing about gender, age, disability, neurodiversity, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, religion, etc. It is worth stating here that bias-free inclusive research goes beyond word choice and extends to the assumptions made by the researchers and the intention and design of the study. If the reviewer has any concerns with this, it will be noted in review. Having an academic writing style is not intuitive. It can be challenging. If we have different sources at Sage, you can use English language editing services or an editor to help with language quality and writing style. Sage offers Sage author services to help with language editing and formatting. One common piece of advice by experts to new scientific writers is practice, practice, practice. It makes you better in writing. And lastly, I'm going to talk for a moment about different types of data. So primary data is data generated by the researcher. Let's skip ahead to qualitative data. That's data presented with words, descriptions, symbols. These data cannot be expressed with numbers. Some examples include interviews, transcripts, case studies, photos, videos, and so forth. There's other types of data that are listed here, but now I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Jessica.
Thank you so much, Hannah. So I'm going to focus briefly on quantitative studies. Data can be complex to understand, so it is important that it is presented clearly. There are numerous ways that you can present your data, including text, tables, graphics, figures, equations, statistics. There are a myriad of options. To use data effectively and trust the results, we need to understand where it came from, how it was defined, and the context in which it was collected, to name a few of the non-exhaustive points. We have a great webinar that dives into this topic, but wanted to cover a few highlights today. This shows an example, a clear presentation of descriptive statistics. It's clear and easy to understand. The way to present that this data isn't complicated as a regression analysis, as we see in the next slide. In the next slide here, we have a super clear visualization of changes over time across multiple different contexts. In the next example here, we have, this is an illustrated teaching pamphlet in Persian used to teach families trach care, feeding tube placement, ventilator management, and other skills they will need in order to bring their loved ones home from the hospital. Our readers worldwide will benefit from seeing this document, whether or not they can read Persian. And so this is a page from a booklet. And then in the next slide, this is an equation example. You want to make sure to example the variables and get that outlined. Here we have a standard results table of the OLS analysis. For those interested in pro-demarcating stat significance, this is a good example. It also makes clear in the footnote what the asterisks mean. And just as all of you are probably rapidly taking notes, these slides will be recorded and circulated for your review to study in more detail. Our next slide here, we have a nice display of predictive values with confidence intervals. I'm going to pass it over to Marty to talk about qualitative and mixed method studies before we get ready to wrap up and head into the Q&A.
Yes, just quickly, quantitative studies are numbers. Qualitative studies are based on the idea that not everything that counts are things that can be counted. There are other things too. Qualitative data is usually expressed in words. It's usually been gathered by surveys or interviews. And then it's presented in, I guess you could say buckets, but it's presented in themes or categories. That's how this data is organized. So when you write your paper, the headings reflect the themes or categories that you identified. And when you're presenting them, the themes themselves and the discussion about them are often in the same place rather than having results and then discussion. It can be difficult to present neatly in tables. Structuring your analysis well is very important. Make sure your reader understands the process where you got these themes. Were you just sitting in a lawn chair in your backyard, or did you sit down with the data and study it and study it? Edit the narrative data for fluency. It's fine to do this. There's nothing unethical about editing this narrative data, as long as it doesn't change the meaning or voice of the participant. You aren't aiming for perfect grammar, but common sense will tell you about the difference between everyday speech that's not academic speech and speech that doesn't reflect well on your participants. The next slide 26 has a good example of narrative data. Next slide. Okay, so I'm sorry. This is an example of a list of participants that when you're presenting your data, you're going to need to tell people who said this particular quote, and you're going to use pseudonyms. You aren't going to use their actual names. But this is the data that readers are going to need to know in order to make sense of what this person said. Next slide. Would you go up 2 slides, because I need to show about the narrative. One more. And then, oh, I'm sorry. There's a slide that's an example of, it gives examples of narrative data, and you can see what I mean about editing out. This person is saying like this and like that, and there are all kinds of non-fluencies. And your readers will thank you for editing that part out. So I'm sorry, if you could go down to slide 28. This is an example of a different kind of narrative data. This isn't data that was gathered by a survey or a interview. This is data, this is a nursing unit in a hospital in China in the early days of the COVID pandemic. They used what's called a mind map to track the infection control processes with their patients. So these words were generated by the hospital staffs who were actually caring for these patients. We published this as a supplemental file, and the next slide shows it in Chinese. We published it in both languages so people could see. And then 28 and 29 is a different kind of qualitative, and that's what these are. So overall, just to say that narrative qualitative data is also very, very important. It's sometimes seen as softer, non-scientific data, but it's all in how you structure it, how you gather it, and how you present it.
Thank you so much, Marty. Just a quick dive into how to present data. Tables are the preferred format when presenting data in research documents. The column and row structure allows readers to easily evaluate, compare, or simply understand the data. Tables and graphs should carry information that cannot be condensed into a paragraph. A well-constructed table should be self-explanatory and include 4 main parts: with the title, the columns, the rows, and the legend. Graphs allow you to present data visually, emphasizing important points so you don't need to spend time on lengthy textual explanations. That's a mouthful. Graphs are particularly good for showing a trend in data that would not be clear in tables. There are many different types of graphs, which we could spend a whole webinar on this, that can be used to present data. A well-constructed graph should have a title, figure legend, and footnotes along with the figure. The title should be concise but informative. A caption or heading should be given to every graph in the research document that succinctly explains the data. This should appear just above or below the graph. A figure legend can be used to define abbreviations, explain symbols, acknowledge sources, and clarify any aspect of a graph for readers. The legend should ensure the graph is self-explanatory. Footnotes should be included where appropriate, detailing any relevant information. It is important to always remember that clear and consistent labeling should be provided for all important or potentially confusing parts of a graph. If you're going to edit any images, so we're talking about illustrations, pictures, and graphs, these should be supplied electronically in the highest quality format, so they will be the best possible resource for your article. Different publishers will have different technical specifications for visuals as supplemental material, so be sure to check the journal guidelines. Images supplied in color will not usually be reformatted, so you should be making sure that the colors are exactly how you wish them to appear when published. When it comes to image editing, you can do so, but try to keep the edits down. Figures should be minimally processed and should reflect the integrity of the original data in the image. Images should not be layered or combined into a single image unless it is stated that the figure is a product of time averaged data. Adjustments to images in brightness, contrast, or color balance should be applied equally to the entire image and should not distort any data in a figure. You always want to be transparent in any edits or changes that you're making to your figures, to your data, and keep notes of any changes that you are making, because if any of your data gets called into question, you have that log in front of you and tracked, so you can always be transparent if anything gets called into question. We do have a great webinar on image transparency. So as you're getting ready to submit, once you decide what journal that you want to submit to, read the submission guidelines. So we've been saying this over and over and over in our webinars, and follow them. We cannot emphasize how much editors appreciate this. Your paper might be rejected if you do not follow the author guidelines. So just make sure to be objective about your work, include all relevant declarations, as Hannah and Marty had talked about, and abide by any research ethics. When in doubt, reach out to the journal editorial office for advice. We have a great submission checklist to go through outlined here. So go through and check that as you're getting ready to submit. We'll be circulating this for you. Some common mistakes to avoid. If you're not thoroughly reviewing the submission guidelines, we've been saying that you might get rejected. You want to check that you're sending in the appropriate article types, making sure it's well formatted, spelling, grammar is all addressed, and that you're writing for the journal that you're submitting to. And then voila, you are ready to submit. Best practice is to only submit to one journal at a time. You'll send it in via the online manuscript submission system. Here at Sage, we use Scholar One or Sage Track, and you'll follow all of the steps outlined in the platform. I wanted to pass it over to Tiffany to share some great tips and tricks before we head into the Q&A. So Tiffany, over to you.
Thank you so much. So I just wanted to share 7 helpful publishing tips. Being that I've been an editor of several journals and I've done a lot of special theme issues, one of the things that I always tell beginning authors or graduate students is, one, you want to publish a variety of work. It's very important that you experience success as a writer. So if you're constantly submitting things and then they're getting rejected, it's really difficult for you to gain the confidence to continually submit your work to different journals. Second, you definitely want to co-author during your first 2 years just to really learn the process of publishing. It can be daunting learning how to navigate all of these systems, submitting all of these edits, and doing this by yourself. And you don't want to get overwhelmed. So working with someone who's willing to mentor you is really key. You also want to publish your work in smaller and larger journals. I've heard horror stories from, junior scholars who say, I've submitted really great work to really large journals and it got rejected. Rejection is part of academic life. And so you want to make sure that you're submitting your work to a variety of places and again, experiencing the success of being published and getting your work out to the general public and the academic community. You also want to publish your work as single author publications from your dissertation, if possible. I know that some advisors want you to publish alongside of them, but that work has already been vetted. So that's the work that you want to put forward as a single author publication during your first few years as an academic. You also want to set up documents prior to writing. So just piggybacking off what Marty said earlier and what Jessica just went over, you have to set up your documents with these headings. The subheadings, as Marty said earlier, are going to be organic, but you want to already have this set up in APA format, Chicago style, and MLA. I'm someone that publishes across journals, so I already have these documents set up. I do recommend that you definitely set these up so that way you're not starting fresh every time you're writing a paper. You also want to set up a double-blind document for submission to a journal in advance, and then that way you can cut and paste your work into the document. And again, that is cutting down on 50% of the work that you will have to do every single time you're submitting a paper to a journal. Finally, you want to create a letter to the editor about your work. Create a standard letter that you could just change by putting in information about the new article you're submitting, as well as the purpose behind why you're submitting the piece. This provides the editor with information about where to send your work. I mean, we have to hunt for reviewers, and it's often helpful if you really give us a rationale for why you wrote this piece. So those are my 7 helpful publishing tips, and I'm going to turn things back over to Sean. Thank you.
Thank you, Tiffany. Thank you to all of our speakers today. We're going to jump right into our Q&A, so keep your questions coming. We're going to get to as many as we can. The first one we've got here, we're kind of going back to the beginning. What points should be indicated in an abstract?
Okay, I'll take that one. So what I typically tell junior scholars and graduate students is you want to think about the abstract as a conversation in terms of being in an elevator with someone. So you're doing almost an elevator pitch for your article. So if you're in an elevator with someone and you're on the top floor and you're going to the bottom floor, by the time you travel down to the bottom floor, someone should know what your article is about. So this is what I recommend. 1, you want to have a topic sentence where you explain the study in 1 sentence. You want to include 1 to 2 sentences for the rationale for your study. You want to include 1 sentence on your methods. You also want to include your population under study if there is one. And you also want to have a closing sentence about your key findings. So that's pretty much how to put together an abstract in shorter terms.
Thank you, Tiffany.
Mm-hmm.
We have another one. How do we make our abstract smart?
Tiffany, do you want to take that?
Define smart.
I wonder if that's referring to the SMART goals with the specific, measurable, attainable, achievable, relatable, and time bound.
Okay, so go through that again. SMART. What is it again?
Specific,
Mhm.
measurable, achievable or attainable,
Mhm.
relatable, and time bound. I think if while you're thinking about that, I think it goes back to Tiffany, what you were saying is really distilling the key elements in your abstract, right? If most people, a lot of times, if you're just browsing through literature, you're looking at the abstract. So it's thinking about what are the key elements that you want people to come across and distill from that before they go ahead and read your whole paper.
Mhm.
And so you want it to be specific, a quick outline of that methodology that was used, highlighting some of the key findings or the hypothesis, what you were looking at. So Tiffany or Marty, I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
Actually, I can just add one more thing, which is to say, this is a great question. I hadn't really thought of that before. But if you're abstracting, in fact, your whole article isn't able to answer those 5 things,
Mhm.
then you've gone off the track somewhere and you need to go back and fix that, because your abstract, whether you're thinking in terms of those 5 terms or not, that's really what your abstract should be. So that's a wonderful question. It kind of, if I can just go ahead and go on to question number 3 then, because they really kind of do go together. Question number
Yeah.
3 was about how, Tiffany, do you want to take number 3? And then I have something to chime in at the very end about that.
Was that the one where
The one
they
about,
were?
is it better to integrate the discussion with the findings, or better to keep them separate?
No, that was the one about results, wasn't it?
Yeah, if
Yeah.
you should integrate your results and the in discussion. Yeah.
You're right. I apologize. No, I do think they should be separate. I definitely think those should be separate sections, particularly in qualitative research.
And I totally agree, because if you think about it, as I said in my explanation of the discussion section, that's where you can speculate. That's where you can ruminate about what these things mean. But first you present your results. But to me, the larger answer is, A, look at your journal's format, not only their author guidelines, but typical articles. How did they handle it? The other part of that is, read your article through the eyes of your readers. And this is where co-authors and people that you acknowledge in that section can help you. Because if it's better for readers to integrate them and your journal allows it, then maybe that is a time to depart from that usual distinction. But if it's going to be more confusing for your readers, then no, it's your readers. That's who we are here for, is our readers.
Right? If no one's able to, you have to think about what would other researchers be searching for? How would they find my research? If no one else if no one's able to find your research, well, then you're not able to get it into the right hands and make that impact that you're hoping to achieve. So thinking about it from the researcher perspective, what others might be looking for, that's a great reminder and something so important that we emphasize.
I think we are at time, but if we could take 30 seconds for one last question, because I think it's a nice action-driving one to wrap up everything. And Marty and Tiffany, I'm wondering if I could pose it to you. Someone asked, as a junior researcher, any tips for finding a mentor or somebody to support as a co-author? Do you have any tips from your angle?
Tiffany,
Oh,
you go
yes.
first.
I'd like to take this one, and I'll leave some time for Marty, but you definitely want to go to your national organizations, the conferences, because typically there are people within special interest groups that are willing to mentor you. Additionally, you also want to consider not just your academic department, but your entire campus. There are mentoring programs that are at institutions where they are willing to match you with someone. And sometimes it might not be a great idea to maybe match directly in your department, but maybe outside your department with someone who has similar research interests. Marty?
and I would like to put in a plug. One of our editorial board members, Hans-Peter de Ruyter, has an international writing group. We just published an article about that in Creative Nursing. They have an Atlantic group and a Pacific group, and it's authors who are helping each other. And and so that's another way to find mentors, is to ask people who are already writing if they can recommend. So I'll send that information about that article for you to look at.
All right.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Jessica, Hannah, Marty, and Tiffany, for your expert guidance. Thank you to everybody for joining us today. We hope to see everyone in a future webinar, and know that we will follow up with everybody who has joined us live with the slides of recording and also a certificate of attendance. And we hope to see you in a future webinar. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Take care.